And welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Always Pressing PGA DFS podcast. We are on another week of no golf coverage, but we decided to do a little DFS strategy talk, and we have a special guest. But before we get to that, let me introduce everybody else, the usual suspects. You can find Bucks on Twitter at BPSnow11. Bucks, how we doing?
Doing great, Bubba. Glad to be back.
Good. Jesse, you can find on Twitter at DFS Golf Gods. Jesse, what's up?
I'm doing well, man. You doing all right?
I'm doing. Find me on Twitter at BDentric. You can find the podcast on Twitter at AlwaysPressDFS. But our guest, let's not waste any time. You can find him on Twitter at AllDayEvery365. His name is Rob Trayah. Rob, how we doing?
Good. How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Good. You can follow Rob on Twitter. Like I said, he's a very knowledgeable PGA guy, other sports as well. Helps out with the BGFS boys that you've heard on other podcasts before. So good stuff there. Let's get right into it. I know it's something that dropped this morning. The PGA finally instituted some new rules that start at the beginning of next year. Bucks, why don't you kick us off with the first one that got put into play?
Yeah, I mean, the big one, and I think what every tour player and every real fan of golf is excited about is the fact that you won't be able to call in or email in penalties, like watching the event. If you see something happen, you can't call it in and basically call it on somebody else. So they're taking that away, which is awesome. And they're going to assign rules officials to watch the live feeds. And I think that's going to be awesome. We had a couple incidents last year, both on tour and the LPGA tour, where it caused quite an uproar. So I'm glad they're finally doing something. But what do you guys think?
What about you, Rob?
Yeah, I think, the first real time I can really remember this rule coming into effect was Tiger at the Masters. I want to say it was like 4 or 5 years ago, where he hit it off the flag and it rolled all the way back into the lake, and he had to take a drop, and he got assessed a penalty after the fact, and everybody thought they were playing a Tiger because it was Tiger. And then last year it's debacle, or 2 years ago with DJ at the U.S. Open, and obviously you were alluding to Lexi last year at the LPGA Tour. It just kind of screws over all the guys that are in contention on Sunday because they get the TV time, whereas guys that go out early who aren't on TV end up not having to deal with anybody that can call in or see anything on TV. So I think it's a much-needed rule. I think it helps out the tour a lot better.
Yeah, and not to mention, golf in general is a game of integrity, a game of honesty. It's meant to be played where you call a penalty on yourself. And the majority of what we saw last year and the last few years are like a matter of not even millimeters of like a ball potentially moving. It's just crazy, some of the stuff that they're reviewing. And so you took a lot of that integrity and honesty away. Plus, as a player, you have to be almost nervous over some of these putts and shots, especially in terrible conditions, because who knows what the TV is going to show. And especially, like you said, if you got a guy that's in the lead, he's going to be on TV 100% more than the guy that's on the cut line. So,
What about you, Jesse?
Yeah, man. I think Rob hit the nail on the head. So the Bucks there. It's one of those things where, like, if you're sitting at home and you're calling in rules, breakers, it's like, what do you have? Like, find something better to do with your time. I don't know if you guys saw the thing on Scratch that Scratch did with the guy who was sitting there. I think they called him, like, his last name was like Ruliana or something like that. Anyway, if you have time, go to Scratch, find that. It is hilarious because it's basically about the whole deal with Lexi last year. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I just want to basically echo what you guys said, and I think it's kind of odd, like you said, like leaders are always going to be on TV, and they're only going to really use TV footage. So how are we going to justify who gets what along the way? But at least it's a step in the right direction. I did like Luke Donald's tweet today. You can love Luke or not, but his tweet was funny. Is how do these guys even get the phone number to this? Where is this found? How does this come to be? Yeah. So it's one of the great mysteries in life, he basically said. So it'll be interesting to see how that all keeps unfolding.
I will say one thing too. It's going to be really interesting to see how they go about like actually interacting with a rule on the course too. You know, that the whole DJ at the US Open was a cluster. It was a mess for 2 hours, and they really didn't know how to handle it. But the first time they actually go in and try to, you know, assess a penalty, how do you think the player is going to react to it? Or how do you think they're even going to walk up to a guy on a tee and be like, oh, you're getting a 2-stroke penalty or a stroke penalty here? It's going to be pretty crazy, I think.
Well, yeah, I was wondering, since they're going to have to review it, do they just stop play?
Great question.
They can't do that.
I mean, and the other thing is you can't tell somebody like they did with DJ, oh, you might get a penalty. But, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, there's a lot of different things. I mean, that's a great point, Bubba. Like, just like, you know, the NFL doesn't keep playing when they're reviewing
because you can't let them go and play 2 holes in it. Like, say it's a Sunday and you have a 4-stroke lead and the guy's charging on you, and now all of a sudden you're losing 2 strokes 2 holes later. It'll totally change the way, or if you're 2 strokes off, I mean, or whatever, it'll change your complete approach to every hole, basically.
They're going to have to, like, do some kind of, like, 15-minute rule or something. Like, the rules official has 15 minutes to review it and make a determination. So that way they kind of can at least get in, or that they're not all the way through maybe the next hole or whatever before, you know, they make that call.
If Jordan Spieth can take 45 minutes on a driving range at the British Open, we can take time to review a thing for 15 minutes.
I'm with you.
Fair enough, yeah.
Play, I don't think.
All right, Jesse, what other rule got put into play?
So this has to do with local rules. If you sign your scorecard and you didn't know that you should have taken a penalty, normally that would be an extra 2-stroke penalty, but they've taken that away. So no additional 2-stroke penalty if you didn't know the rule and didn't account for it on your scorecard. And this goes back to the integrity thing that Bucks was talking about before. I mean, this is a gentleman's game, and it should continue to be a gentleman's game. And you know, I really don't think anybody's out there actively trying to cheat. There's always going to be certain people who are trying to live in gray areas. But the way golf is, and when you grow up playing golf, like, it's just not a part of the game to cheat. So I back that rule 100%. You know, I don't think you should. I think you should take the penalty if you should have taken a penalty, but there's no point in taking 2 more shots.
It's wild with as many officials that are rolling around a golf course that do know the local rules. All the volunteers are there. It should never come to the 19th hole where you're signing the golf card to make that happen.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's another thing that with all these guys playing all over the place, and some guys having to, you know, this year after they started it last year, playing courses for the first time, it's just impossible for them to keep up with the 20, 30 different courses that they may play. I mean, I remember DJ kind of got screwed at the PGA at Whistling with the whole bunker rule in his first major that he was going to have. And, you know, does he play that hole differently? I don't know. It's DJ. But at that point, you know, if you take that out of that, he's not in a playoff. So.
What about you, Bucks?
Yeah, I mean, I thought this rule was ridiculous in the first place. I mean, like Lexi last year, she didn't know she was getting a penalty. So how could she possibly get another penalty for not knowing she was getting a penalty? It's just, it was ridiculous. And so I'm glad they're doing away with it. These are just a few of some of the most ridiculous rules in the rule book. I think they need to do an overhaul to really help out not only tour players, but the average golfer in general, to get a handle on what the actual rules are, because there's a 280-page rule book full of these type of scenarios.
Yeah, and I guess they could say it falls back on the caddy, but like you said, Rob, they play 30-plus different courses. Every course has its intricacies. Like, how are you supposed to know everything under the sun? Even my local course, there's like 3 rules, depends on who you're playing with that day, of which way they freaking decide it's supposed to go, because it's different for each course knowledge, basically. It's really weird, and I'm glad they got rid of it, because there's no point in, double slapping them on the hand, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's get into the quote-unquote important stuff to everyone that listens to this podcast, the PGA DFS strategy talk. And trust me, the rules aren't not important because that's going to affect our DFS this season. But let's start. We'll have Rob answer every question first, and let's go around the horn on these. But Rob, when you're doing your research, when you're getting ready, what type of materials, websites, models, what do you do to kind of get ready to build your lineups?
Sure. So I think the first place I always go is Fantasy National, which is pretty much just a model website for you. They do it. They make it so easy for you. Moose, Mooseonomics over there. He put together a pretty good website. I've used that for the past half year for sure. I'm an analytical dude. That's just kind of my background. So I'm always looking for numbers to kind of back up my models. So in terms of that, I'm always looking for a strokes gain for sure. And I put more of a heavy reliance on form. I really think that's key in the game of golf. I think it's very important for, everybody except for Matt Every, I guess, at this point. Course history goes a long way for sure, but I think guys that are putting up a monster month are always going to be guys I'm going to look towards first. I think Tony Finau, for example, last year, who was another guy I think this year is going to have a breakout year, even though he quote unquote kind of did last year. He was always low priced. He was a low price guy in DK, and I think he missed 1 or 2 cuts last year, if that. But he was always a guy that could put up numbers. So Fantasy National definitely helps with that. It definitely helps pinpoint, and they keep adding more and more information to that site, whether it's ownership kind of projections, which is a risky world to dive into. But they make it very customizable so that all four of us here that you go on that website could all come out with different guys. Some of it might overlap, obviously, but it always helps me look for form versus class. I don't know about you guys. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff, but I don't know what your interaction with Fantasy National is.
Yeah. I mean, we all use it.
Yeah.
I actually don't.
What do you do, Bob? Oh, you don't, Jesse?
No, I've looked on there a little bit, but I haven't. I never got into it because I've always done my modeling through Fantasy Labs. So I don't know. I've got models saved in there, and that's what I use. And I think a huge difference in it too is obviously Labs is not fully concentrated on golf, which is a great thing for Fantasy National that you can go there and that's all they care about. They care about golf 110%. I think that's can really make them stand out above any other website out there. And I hope that they don't try to get into other sports because I think it kind of muddies the waters. Yep. The other thing is the Fantasy National uses every single stat you can possibly want. And I'm limited with Labs to kind of basic stats, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because I do like to keep it simple. But I'm instead of looking at strokes gained, tee to green, I'm more of greens and regulation, driving accuracy, driving distance, that kind of thing. So I know Bucks uses it though.
Yeah, I use it every week. Basically, what I do is I run through the players and get a feel for their price. And obviously, I already have an idea in my mind, I'm glad you brought up recent form because that's probably the number one thing that I look at in terms of player selection, that and kind of cut percentage. But then, I definitely dive into Fantasy National, and I'll go into – I don't personally dive into too much of the bent grass versus Bermuda type thing unless it's a certain player really, really stands out. But I'm looking at a lot of the things depending on the course. So fairways, greens, proximity, that kind of thing. But I think it's been great. When it comes to your contest selection, are you more cash or GPP?
I'm more of a cash guy. I don't know why, but it looks, I only primarily play on DK. I should probably play a little bit more on FanDuel just because I like having more golfers out there. But the pricing models on DK just suck for GPPs. I mean, that's
you're welcome here, Rob.
Yeah.
You fit right in.
Do you like the 7K range by chance?
Yeah, no kidding. 7, 8K guys all the time, pretty much in cash. I mean, you throw a 9K guy in there once in a while, but yeah, I just think you're more likely to make money in cash games than you are in GPPs at this point.
Yeah.
That not to say I'm not going to chuck in a few entries in like the millionaires or max enter like the $4, which is I think like 20 entries, but I'm not going to sit there and build out 150 rosters for my 150K that won't hit anyways.
Yeah. As we've gone through this season, I've become a big fan of the max entering the 20 max. Either that or stick into like the 3 max world. That's kind of where I like to dabble and go there. But yeah, the GPP world on DraftKings, it's just the pricing in general. Like you said, it's a joke. But FanDuel, I haven't played as much as I know Jesse has, but there is definitely a difference there from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the main difference is 8 versus 6 golfers. 8 on FanDuel, 6 on DraftKings. I'm still 90% DraftKings because they have the way bigger GPPs, and I'm pretty much a GPP player. I will dabble in cash if I feel good about a particular play, because it's really important also too to look at ownership even when you're playing cash.
Yeah.
And I think it's more important in cash than it is in other sports such as NFL or NBA even. So I'm all GPP. I know Bucks is as well for the most part. I mean, I'm probably 90-10, and sometimes I'll go 50-50, but it's rare anymore because I'm a degenerate. Bucks.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know, most of the listeners know I'm 100% GPP. I have dabbled in cash before and done fairly well, but I mean, I'm really looking for that 3 to 4 good weeks every like half season. I mean, it's hard to avoid the 333 that pays out so well, or some of the other events that like the GPP prize money on DraftKings actually like decent. Whereas like we've seen it so far this kind of off season, but like the cash games are what they typically are, but the GPPs are much smaller, so they're not as enticing. For me, I mean, yes, I absolutely want to make money. That's 100% the goal, and done a decent job at doing that. But it's also entertainment value. I want that sweat, and so I'm 100% a GPP guy.
Yeah. Do you guys go with? I know Jesse, you were saying you play a lot of FanDuel, or you play the most probably out of us out of FanDuel. But do you guys enjoy the weekend golf at this point? Or are you still trying to figure that out? Or is that just not enough there for you? I know what they were trying to do in terms of, a team completely blows out of the water Thursday, Friday. They still want to have that returning customer come back on the weekend. But it seems like it can get too congested to the point of, one par here, one par there, obviously kind of ruins it.
Most definitely. I think that's a great question. I think it'll be better with the upcoming season. So right now there's a lot of, other sports going on, obviously. And then we're going to get into bigger golf tournaments. I think it's cool, really fun to play at the majors, especially when Tommy Fleetwood sinks my team on Thursday. You can start building some teams for Saturday, Sunday. So I have, I've played that quite a bit. I did play it quite a bit over the summer, and I'll probably get back into it. But they've got to also bump up the prizes a little bit on it. And I won't play any cash in weekend at all. Have you played cash, Rob?
No, like the weekend stuff, I'll only play GPPs. That's pretty much it. Like cash I have no idea how to figure out a strategy for cash in the weekend, let alone GPPs at this point.
I'm with you on that. Let me ask you this. This isn't kind of on our list here, but what's your like cash game strategy for somebody who's maybe just, looking to get into golf and start playing and dabbling in a little bit? And if you don't want to, reveal all your trade secrets, perfectly fine, but a general idea of what you think about when you go to make a cash team.
Yeah, I mean, most cash lineups, I'll try to put together at least 5 to 10 of them. but primarily most of them centered around 3 to 4 guys. That way, you can kind of miss and match your lowest, who you think possibly your lowest owned guy would be, or most unlikely to make a cut, I guess, at that point. If you're dabbling in the low 7s where Louis Oosthuizen isn't there that weekend, thanks DK. Yeah, I mean, most cash guys, a lot of the people will turn towards the names, whereas you can, as Bucks was saying, you can really find guys that are worth it knowing they're going to make a cut because, 80-90% of the time in the season that they're having, they're going to make a cut, and they're probably not going to be that high owned. Like, I'll keep bringing up Finau until I die. I mean, the guy last year had a monster year. In the beginning of the year, you couldn't find that guy over 5% owned, and didn't make any sense where he was actually contending most weekends. So, the Adam Scotts of the world, he's dropping prices. Jason Day towards the end of the year, you could find him in like 8K, but that's just a name at that point. If you look at what they did all season, you couldn't find them near the top of the leaderboard if you tried.
Yeah. There was not this past summer, the previous summer, I was on Fabian Gomez like every week because he was always $6,800 and he was always making a cut. And Bubba this year has been over and on Martin Flores forever, and the dude is a cut machine, and he's cheap, and he's just one of those roster fillers. He's going to be there on the weekend and get you that point.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Sorry, another guy I would say was just going to like Lucas Glover at the end of last year. The guy couldn't miss a cut. I mean, his knee fell out of place or whatever that was, but he was another guy you could just kind of lock and load, and it didn't really make sense, but he would always make a cut.
Yep. Cut makers are great. Sink was there at one point, but Flores, Glover, a lot of those cheapies are good.
Mm-hmm.
What's your cash strategy when you're building your lineups?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like to play different lineups in different tournaments. Like I won't stack the same lineup in, I don't know, like a 20 entry. I won't put the same lineup in there 5 times if I feel great about it. I mean, that's not the point of cash. It's just variability at that point, and you're not trying to hit a high number at all. You're just trying to make sure you find 6 guys that kind of make cuts. But I know for cash stuff, I usually try to look at the weather. I know that's always been an important thing in golf. People really didn't focus on it, I guess, until a couple of years ago. I think there was one tournament that kind of blew everybody out of the water. But, if you find a bad draw, I think it's very easy to build a cash lineup compared to a GPP where you feel like you have to revolve kind of your core around one dude or 2 dudes that might end up on the bad side of a draw, which can always happen, especially if you think the weather's going to do something or you're building out lineups come Tuesday night and you're not really sure on the weather. And then obviously Wednesday night comes around and weird storms come through. I don't know. It's tons of variability around it. So I'm always trying to look for, any type of weather. But
Bucks, why don't you get the next question there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When you're thinking about the lineups, when you're thinking about your cash game strategy, what would you say your strategy is for a large field GPP? And as somebody this is like the only thing that I enter, so I'm super interested in hearing your thoughts.
Blunt.
I mean, one of the things I'll definitely try to find is Vegas odds real early, like as soon as they come out, whether it's any of the majors, and just kind of keep tabs on guys that I think outside of the top names, obviously, because they're at such a low number anyways most of the time, and just kind of see who's making the biggest moves because there's way smarter people out there than me, that's for sure. And you see a guy move from 120 to 80 to 1, and he's sitting at high 6s, low 7s, or he's a mid-7 type of guy on DraftKings. Like, that's probably a guy I'm going to put a little more stock into, even if he's not fitting my model at that point. I mean, Vegas pretty much knows all. I'll rely on that till the day I die at this point. But,
Yeah.
For
Go ahead.
no, sorry, go ahead. That's all I had, really.
I was gonna say, yeah, I do the same thing. So Vegas odds are a huge indicator of kind of where the money's moving, who's been hotter recently, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even for the large field GPPs, my core focus is going to be on 6 guys that can make a cut. I mean, you'll see in some events, I think the PGA Championship last year, having 6 guys was guaranteed money. And so I think first and foremost, I'm going to look for guys that I believe are going to make the cut. But then again, after that, it's really looking at guys that can put up some really solid numbers. I mean, everybody on tour can play, obviously, but there's just some guys that are more in line with what you need to score DK points or FanDuel points.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the guys that I target, look at the Vegas odds. And then, like you said, I'm glad you mentioned weather, because I think that's a thing that has been becoming more popular in the last few years, but that's really, really big for the first couple of days. I mean, we've had a couple of tournaments in the last year where it's been a really, really big advantage to have like the AM wave and then the PM on Friday and vice versa. So I'm glad you mentioned that. What do you think, Bubba?
Yeah, when I'm doing my GPPs, I do like that weather concern as well, but I look to kind of get my Floreses of the world down below that I know are kind of just not going to light the world on fire, but they'll make the cut and maybe light the world on fire. And then other than that, I want to get my big boys up top there. We had our Paul Casey guy. We knew he wouldn't win, but he'd contend and stuff like that, because get that 6 of 6 through, make that money and go. But there is the point where you got to take your gambles a little bit and try to deviate from the norm. But for the most part, I got to the point last year where I just wanted that 6 of 6 and move on, because it got so chalky at times last year. It was ridiculous, and you couldn't be cute with it at all.
Yeah.
What about you, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, so whenever I'm building when I do build a cash lineup about once a week at least, and I'll put it in some smaller GPPs or even in a cash game or two just to try to hedge a little bit, but also throw that obviously in a large field GPP as well, just in case you hit the nuts like I did this past summer one time. So one time out like 54, it mattered. But either way, so when I'm building a cash team, I'm trying to go more balanced, strictly cut makers, guys that I just feel like really good about making the cut that week. And then looking at some ownership projections as well on that. But when I focus on large field GPPs, I'm looking more for to find a low owned guy who I really feel like could potentially win, kind of come out of nowhere and win, because that's what you got to have. You got to have the guy who's 1 or 2% and does really well, top 10s, top 5s, and contends for the win in order to win a large field GPP. And when I say that, I'm talking about like 1,000 or more, even. So for me, it's they're similar. I wouldn't really say that like a cash lineup is strictly a cash lineup and a GPP lineup is strictly a GPP lineup. I mean, right. There's always in golf, there's always a lot of what ifs. That's what makes you kind of feel like, oh God, this could seriously tank. And that's why I don't like cash as much. But then again, I've gone away from playing a lot of cash in all of my in all the sports that I play, which is every sport. So it's mostly because I don't know. I mean, the edge is gone, I think, in a lot of this stuff. So it's difficult.
Yeah. The last
hey, Rob,
thing last thing that I'm going to mention here, Bubba, is we talked about this with Rob last week, Bolton. Golf is crazy, man. I mean, it is literally the only sport on the planet where you can look at stats all day long, and if somebody shows up to play, they're going to go bananas. Like Larry Mize could come and show up and shoot under par one day, be min-priced. Or Davis Love last year a couple times. Freddie Couples is always good for a couple rounds a year. And so you can look at the stats all day long, look at recency, that kind of thing, but you have to go with your gut a little bit as well. Have the stats to back it up. But golf is so unpredictable. Anybody has a chance to do it. Make sure you have a process and stick to it. And make sure that you're comfortable with the lineup you're selecting, because ultimately you have a 4-day sweat, hopefully. If you go into the event hating your lineup, I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, and I would just add on top of that too, like there's so much information out there, and golf is such an individual sport. Like the smallest things matter. You know, I call them like TMZ events, pretty much any type of life event. You know, you just had a kid, you have no sleep, you're traveling cross country, you go play golf. You're not going to wake up Thursday morning ready to go. Or even small little equipment changes. Like there's so many clubs that affect the golfer compared to, you know, a football player out there who can kind of go hide on a field with other guys. Might not have his best game, but team wins. Whereas, you know,
Yep.
I feel for a guy like Billy Horschel who had to hide kind of what happened with his wife last year, and he still goes out and wins the tournament. You know, he breaks down afterward. But he's a guy that you never, like, we can get to this later, but I would always play him. And I wouldn't understand how he couldn't put together 4 rounds or 2 rounds, let alone at that point. But small little things like that, like you're saying, can pop up and just kind of ruin anybody's weekend.
That's always been a thing of ours. Is we said it'd be awesome if there was like tournament insiders that could tell us the little things that we can't find out between the ropes. Even something as small as, hey, this guy went out until like 3 a.m. last night. He's got 13 time of the day, But then definitely stuff like Billy Horschel and, you know, other guys that have had issues, you know, at home or something.
Yeah.
It'd be tremendous because everybody that plays golf knows there's so much of it that's mental that it could be game changing.
Exactly.
Now we know you're pretty primarily a cash guy, so this can affect cash games just like GPPs. But when we get to those smaller tournaments, like at the end of the year, and we'll have some in Hawaii and some of the WGCs, and you're at 100 or less, no cut event type deals. How do you affect your strategy that way, or do you kind of stick with your guns?
I think you kind of have to change it just because you know you're getting 4 rounds out of guys. I think you could be a lot more aggressive. I don't see why you wouldn't be. I'm not going to sit there and play the Bill Haases of the world for 4 rounds. Where, yeah, exactly. You got Harold Varner. Obviously, Justin Thomas is like the #1 candidate. He's a birdie or better guy. It didn't really matter for him in those type of tournaments. Obviously put together everything last year. You know, guys like Brooks Koepka, who, you know, they're going to be in every Par 5 and 2, so they get better chances at Eagle, which are more points. Whereas, you know, like you're saying, the shorter hitters, the Zach Johnson of the world, sure, they might go out and shoot 10 under, but they're going to have 11 birdies and 1 bogey, while Koepka might have 18 birdies and 7 bogeys. At that point, he's making you more money. So I think at that point, you could play it a lot more aggressive with dudes.
Yeah, most definitely. We talk about it a lot. Those guys that go for it, eagle makers, birdie or better type stuff, it's game on. And we also talk about don't go too crazy that week because the variance is a little different than most weeks.
Yeah, you see Gary Woodland sitting at 20 over in WGC at Bridgestone, and you're like, well, didn't hit it right this week. So
yeah, you might as well turn it off. I got one question, Bubba, and I mean I pretty much know the answer for the other 2, but obviously, Rob, I don't know you. So have you dabbled in the Euro golf much? Do you play it at all or gotten into it?
I'll do it more in terms of the side events where I feel like they're bigger than the PGA one, just because I don't want to wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays to watch guys finish, really. But I mean, the big time events out there, obviously they have the better quality golf out there right now in terms of the fall swing, where you can go see Justin Rose, who should probably win this week. But I feel like if DK ever got smart and actually put together like relatively decent sized GPPs for that, I see a bunch of people complain all the time that, you know, for stronger field events where you have guys from America, like the Scottish Open, you have the Patrick Reeds, the Phil Mickelsons of the world travel over there. It's a perfect opportunity to get your product in front of those guys that normally wouldn't play the Euro Tour. So I'll definitely play it those weeks, but I won't necessarily make it a mainstay where I just there's not enough information out there about most of those guys unless you're doing some serious work.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I talk about all the time, and Bubba and I talk about Euro golf all the time because we're pretty big fans of it, but there's all kinds of like Euro cappers because obviously it's legal in most of Europe to bet.
Yep.
So there's so many cappers, and I lean on them a lot more than I do the guys who are doing the PGA Tour or whatever, who are putting out bets for that. I lean on those guys because they know what they're talking about. I know Bubba knows what I'm talking about with those guys.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Now let's talk some up-and-coming players as we get into the year. The young guns are in full force this past year, and there's a lot more to come. You have web.com guys, other young guys. You mentioned Finau already. Bucks, why don't you kick us off on this?
Yeah, I mean, so the question I would pose to pretty much everybody, but is what are some of the players that you're looking forward to seeing? There's a ton of guys, especially guys that went through Q school, even some web.com guys that'll play on tour a little bit. So who are the players that you're most excited to see this year?
Right.
Yeah, I can take it. So, I mean, I actually went to school with this kid. He was a year younger than me. He's Sam Ryder, who came in second last year on the web.com tour. So I have some personal connection there. He can hit it a ton and he can putt, which doesn't usually go hand in hand. And I think he fell short of the U.S. Open last year by 2 strokes. But he was close to winning about 3 tournaments last year. He finally got his first win. And he had finished just outside of the top 25 the year before. So you could kind of see that natural progression going on as a guy that could kind of, he's from Florida. So I would assume he's going to play some of those smaller events, obviously the side tour events, but the Florida events he's probably going to be involved with there. And the other guy is Stefan Jaeger. He made the cut last year. He was, the world kind of number 1. He made the cut at the U.S. Open. He's another dude that he won a bunch last year. He won the week before the U.S. Open, played well, made the cut, and then I think he won after it too. So he's a type of another name that I'm looking at. I love the web.com tour guys because it's so competitive now.
Crazy,
those guys, yeah, I mean, with all the guys that won last year too, Grayson Murray, for all the flack that he gets, he goes out and wins a side tour event. I mean, it's just a perfect stomping ground, especially at this point where now they have that Q school where you see a guy like Lee McCoy, who was playing tour events, has to go there and win. And I think that just goes to the fact of like the quality of golfer that kind of going the Euro route like a Koepka did in terms of Peter Uihlein last year. He didn't play at all on the web.com tour. He showed up for one event and won it. He's like, all right, I won my card. Let's play. So I think it's a great stopping ground. It's a great proving point. They play some great tracks too. So I don't think you can go wrong with any type of those guys. But I don't know about you guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I'm glad you brought up Uihlein. I really like him. I think he's going to play great this year. And some of the Euro that I did follow, he was obviously super chalky, but for a good reason. 2 other guys that I'm looking forward to seeing this year. This guy will play a little bit on tour this year. Maverick McNeely, super talented. I mean, really, really talented. Can really get hot too. So he's always fun to watch. And then the last guy I'll mention is Keith Mitchell. He is a beast, man. I watched quite a bit of the web last year, and he's just super solid. I think he led like 6 or 7 stat categories on the web.com last year. Really consistent, hits the ball pretty far, straight. He's a beast, so I can't wait to see him this year.
How about you, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm kind of looking for some of these guys who've already been on tour to see if they can take it the next step. Like, for instance, Kevin Tway. Can he actually pull through and put 4 rounds together, make and win a golf tournament? Xander Schauffele, obviously finished so hot last year, but can he break through and win multiple times this year and or win a major? Austin Cook has already won this year, so he's kind of there, but he would be another guy that I would mention on that. And then I can't go without mentioning Tommy Fleetwood.
Yes, sir.
Coming over to the United States, and will be on I will roster him every single week that he plays.
Yeah, he's going to be money, and I'll kind of piggyback off of what you were saying. I do love Fleetwood, but I want to see a guy like Smiley Kaufman. We had Spieth the first year, then Thomas, and they still say like Kaufman's almost as talented, if not more talented than them most days. So I want to see if he can finally take that next step, or if not wearing a hat while you play golf seriously an issue. I don't know. But and then like, your web.com guys, we talk about them like Burgoon and Gooch. They've been entertaining. Love Ladies, another member of that little group. But yeah, Uline, we saw Cantlay come on. I think we all agree he's gonna have a huge year this year. Yeah. There's a ton to love with these young guns.
For sure.
The competition for the Ryder Cup is going to be nuts towards the end of the year with the amount of talent that the American team's going to have.
Especially with Tiger trying to get in.
That too. That's a good point. I know you already mentioned Finau, and you can mention him again. You can kind of talk about why, but do you have any favorites, kind of guys from a DFS perspective that you just are basically plugging every week for one reason or the other? Probably.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong about Paul Casey. I know you guys were talking about him earlier, but I think he already said he's going to come out and he's going to play the Euro Tour next year because he wants to play in the Ryder Cup too. So kind of lose him a little bit.
Wait, so you were a big PC guy?
Yeah, I mean, I know he'd never win because that's just not what he does. But
we'll have to justify him to us.
Yeah. He's a guy who's going to hit every green. He's not going to make any putts. It's just the way it goes. I mean, he's going to show up he'll show up on Friday and he'll be gone by Saturday, but he'll be there. So.
Just killing my dude, PC. My goodness.
Other guys I would play that I couldn't get away from, not necessarily a good thing, was Billy Ho. Like I was saying, I just never understood it. There were just weeks where he could putt the lights out of everything, and then the next week he couldn't hit a fairway, so it didn't even matter. It obviously started to make sense at the end of the year, but I look at past major winners just for that name because I know they've been there. The Lucas Glovers of the world. Billy Ho won the FedEx Cup, 3-4 years ago, so he could do it. For him to not go out on some of these smaller events like the Valspar, Honda, and not put it together was kind of frustrating, I guess you could say, at least. And then I'll play Keegan. I don't know why. Throw up a lot when I do it, but if he's gonna continue to hit the fairway and hit greens, there's got to be at some point he can use his shoe or something to putt. But he's an ultra frustrating dude. But I'll play those guys pretty much primarily whenever I can. Really, they just keep the ball in play so much that it doesn't make sense to not play them, and they'll dabble around the cut, and you'll get your sweat in pretty early on Friday. That's for sure.
No doubt.
Bubba, what you got?
We were all on the PC bandwagon for sure. I can't not say Martin Flores. That was a guy I literally would play every week. He's available in the mid sixes. Outside of that, if you're just looking for cup makers, Stuart Sink was there for a while. He died off at the end. And one guy that Bucks liked a lot and kind of got me onto him was our good old boy Flat Bill Pat Perez. He was something fun to. Because at worst, you're going to be highly entertained by that greasy-haired guy running around out there. But it's good stuff. Good stuff with him. What about you, Bucks?
Yeah, there's a few guys last year that I always gravitated towards them. You already mentioned Perez. I love watching him play. There was 3 or 4 weeks during the summer that I couldn't get myself off Sabatini either. Which was weird. He actually played well a couple of those events. But most weeks, I would say Xander was one that we were on for a while. Cantlay, I seemed to roster every single week. And then one guy that I really like that I know Jesse is not a huge fan of is Webb Simpson. So I use him quite a bit.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What about you, Jesse?
obviously, you guys know about me and PC and our relationship, and it's going to be coming to an end. But he will be playing in Euro Tour. I play it every week, so I'll keep playing him. But I like what Rob was talking about there with Glover. Glover was at the end of the year, man. Every lineup, I put him on there, and it was sometimes tilting to not see him make a run on the weekend, but he was making cuts so consistently it was hard to pass up. And then Xander, I could never get him right, but I loved rostering him. Cantlay was another guy who I thought was on almost every team that I made last year when he played after he started playing well. And so, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. If you read my article every week, it's pretty much the same guys, just different reasons why to play him every week.
Yeah, I mean, so the one guy that I have to bring up, because we really haven't talked about him, surprisingly, is Tiger. He is a guy that I will likely roster every single week until he wins, and I'll probably go broke doing it.
He will.
Yeah.
Think on that, Rob. What's your thoughts on Tiger?
I mean, it's gonna be sort of interesting. I mean, it's exciting for the first time to really kind of actually think about him as a viable option outside of just fanboying it.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's smart, which he should be about his back this time, he's going to play a very consolidated schedule, right? So he'll play the Tories, he'll play everywhere he's won, which all the better for guys that are going to roster him at that point, right? Because the course history is there, and he could step out there tomorrow and play left-handed and probably make cuts if he's healthy. It'll be really interesting to kind of see where the sites price him. If they price him to the point of they know everybody's going to play him anyways, or they're going to actually price him at a price point that makes sense where he might not contend, but he's going to be around. That's the point that I'll be more interested in, I guess, at this point. I'll definitely play him. There's no way I'm not going to, but
yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be over him that much.
Yeah, for sure.
One last question for you, Rob. Do you have any, I wouldn't say bold calls or predictions? What are you looking forward? Any first-time major winners or anything this year?
That's a good question. I think Justin Rose is definitely going to win another major this year. He should have won the Masters last year. That was kind of ridiculous that he didn't win that. But I think Shinnecock's another one of those courses that kind of suits him too. I think they're going to play that one really tough just for the fact of how everything went at Erin Hills last year. And I don't see that being a birdie fest at all. It's probably going to be a massacre, to be honest. So yeah, Justin Rose kind of coming back and be a major winner. I would say that I don't think JT is going to have that as good of a year. I think he's going to be pretty decent, but I could definitely see him kind of sliding a little bit. But as first time winner, I mean, how do you not throw Cantlay up there? Really? I mean, he didn't miss a cut last year. He already won again this year. It's hard not to say that he might be the guy that comes out of I wouldn't say nowhere, obviously now, but he'd be the guy that kind of fills out and wins a major.
I like it. Well, Rob, we appreciate you being on the podcast this week, and we'll definitely be in touch. Maybe have you on again for some major coverage or something later this year. I got Rob on Twitter at alldayevery365. As we stated earlier, go follow him. Good PGA stuff and more. You can follow the pod at Always Press DFS, Bucks at BP Snow 11, Jesse at DFS Golf Gods. I am at BD Entric. And everybody, thanks for listening. Always Pressing PGA DFS Strategy Talk and more with Rob Trayah. Thanks, guys. Catch you guys later.
Thanks, guys.
Rob.
See ya.